All right, guys. So I'm about to read a paper. Now, this may be different from the Google Docs document that I will link in the description because it is ever changing. I made a video not too long ago regarding objective morality. It was mainly in response to theists' claims that they do have an objective morality. And I think it went into whether or not anyone can have objective morality. This morality itself, and I even get into like meta ethics and everything. I like it all. So this is really interesting to me. Someone reached out through the comments in that video named Tomato Potato, also known as Noob to Creative English, and basically claimed it was a very long, I still haven't gotten through all of it, and that's sort of why I'm still kind of wrestling with the idea. I really don't know where I stand on it right now because I have to give it its fair shake, so to speak, before I can come to any sort of conclusion about it. But it's an interesting concept so far at the very least, and I think many of you will find it interesting. So what I plan to do, I'm going to read just a beginning little slice of it, and then you kind of go from there. I've met many people who just never dig into reading shit, and it is what it is. Like I can just dig into whatever, and I always do. Although it really depends on my time and all that good stuff. But for whatever reason, certain people only engage when things are like presented to them through video or audio or both. So this is sort of an attempt to bridge that gap a little bit. So I'll give you a little preview. You decide whether or not this is something that you're into, and then you can check out the document if you would like to. So let's go ahead and jump in. It's entitled Functional Moral Realism by Tomato Potato, aka Noob to Creative English. It was last updated February of 2025. It doesn't have an exact date, but it was more than likely like yesterday or the day before, I think. Anyway, there's an objective, foundational moral fact in this universe, so long as what we consider facts are designed to help us navigate the real world. Whatever a society deems moral or ethical must be aligned with the continued function of the society, or else it's malfunctional and objectively wrong. This is the non-negotiable moral fact, so long as objectively correct and objectively wrong are to hold any practical meaning in the real world. It's the foundational fact from which all other valid functional moral facts are discovered and derived. Taking a break here for just a moment. Sometimes I tend to read fairly quickly, at least I guess for me. Everybody reads at different speeds and takes in information at different speeds. But many people tell me that I read fairly quickly sometimes, and you'll notice when I'm doing it that I'll tend to trip up every so often. In this particular one, I'm not going to do that because this is quote unquote heavy for many people. And it takes some relatively rigorous thought to like kind of entertain these things. So it's, I think, a really bad idea for me to do that. Anyhow, continuing, and this kitten is going crazy at the same time. Is this basically teleology? It focuses on objective requirements rather than the function, telos, itself. Instead of emphasizing the acorn's function of becoming a magnificent oak tree, it examines its needs: water, soil, temperature, etc. Disclaimer: this paper has the sole aim of persuading readers of the functional requirement for moral systems as the objective basis for morality. It isn't intended to provide a comprehensive guide on moral evaluations. Additionally, while concepts like love, justice, flourishing, and dignity are deeply important to human beings, this meta-ethical framework doesn't deal with them as intrinsic values and only hypothetical, instrumental requirements. Just as engineers must avoid focusing on beauty in order to remain entirely objective, we must avoid focusing on concepts like human flourishing to remain in the realm of objectivity. Isn't beauty important for buildings? Absolutely. An ugly house that no one wants is worthless, no matter how structurally sound it is. Beauty plays a crucial role in architecture, but can anyone define an objective requirement for universal beauty? One that transcends cultural and personal preferences? If so, I gladly include it in my paper. Otherwise, I must focus solely on functional requirements to remain completely objective. Structural integrity transcends subjective factors because it has non-negotiable functional constraints. Objectively wrong morals. In real-world functional terms, objectively wrong refers to something that's malfunctional, to be in violation of foundational requirements. Examples: bridge designs lacking structural integrity are malfunctional and objectively wrong. Computer programs that crash during operation would be objectively wrong. Business strategies that inevitably lead to bankruptcy are objectively wrong. As moral systems and frameworks function to guide their followers, any malfunctioning ones are those needlessly losing their followers. Those which lose all followers have completely ceased to function. Epistemic challenges. Determining whether a complex system is functioning or malfunctioning, along with how, when, where, or why, is no trivial task and requires navigating a sea of uncertainties. Those who constructed the Leaning Tower of Pisa did the best they could at the time with their knowledge. Now we realize it was constructed on the shallowest and faultiest of foundations, kept standing only due to the tireless efforts of modern engineers. Today we can construct skyscrapers that withstand earthquakes, but people in the future will likely look back on our efforts and realize we made our share of errors as well. We do the best we can given what we know today. Not about mere existence. A common misunderstanding among readers of my earlier drafts was that a system's mere existence proves its functions correctly, implying we could justify any atrocity through this simple criterion. The Leaning Tower of Pisa still stands despite glaring structural flaws. Large-scale software riddled with inefficiencies and frequent crashes may retain users, but only because they tolerate the bugs. Saving often to prevent data loss and sipping coffee while waiting for sluggish load times. North Korea still exists, even as countless citizens risk their lives to escape. We can't afford to abandon every flawed system and start from scratch. What we can do is identify clear malfunctions and severe inefficiencies. We don't need to wait for a buildup to collapse to recognize that its structural integrity is compromised, nor for a city plagued by crime and civil unrest to be left in ruins before safely assuming the need for a policy change. What if North Korea outlasts us all without changing their regime? You would then be wrong. Correctness in the face of uncertainty isn't about exactly how the future unfolds, otherwise it'd be an impossible standard, but about whether an assumption is safe versus reckless and reasonable versus unreasonable. This is a common source of moral confusion I see in the face of uncertainties. In poker, it's incorrect to expect deuces to beat aces after the draw, even though it happens about 1 in 5 times. It's wrong to assume people can safely drive drunk, even though they manage sometimes. If I leap off a cliff, the sane expectation is death, even though some extraordinarily survive. The reasonable assumption is that a country whose citizens risk their lives to flee needs change, especially when errors cost lives. Example, mission critical systems. Correctness is not about omniscient predictive ability or foreknowledge, but about avoiding the risk of being catastrophically wrong. What about deeply resilient systems that endure for generations despite internal suffering? A reasonable assumption is that they'd be even more resilient without such needless internal suffering. Sophisticated frameworks for navigating uncertainties like Bayesian decision theory aren't necessary to see that a business with mostly disgruntled customers is exposing itself to unnecessary risk. How about cultures that lasted for over 1,000 years, such as the Byzantine Empire? They adapted over time to remain functional. No system continually used by people persists that long untouched. They were still destroyed in the end. Longevity doesn't equate to a system free of malfunctions. The Leaning Tower of Pisa still stands, but that doesn't mean it was correctly designed or structurally sound. And finally, humans were nomadic hunter-gatherers for over 90% of our history. Would we really be better off if most of society reverted to that way of life? I'm going to leave off there. Next is only a starting point. You can choose to continue if you would like, but I figured I'd give a little introduction here. And I think that it's really interesting, and it's something that I've never considered before. I've honestly never heard anything like this in the realm of non-theistic objective morality. Again, as I said before, Sam Harris made an attempt, but I think that it's just riddled with flaws. To me, it doesn't even require a whole lot of like philosophical knowledge or anything to see the flaws in Sam Harris's argument. But this is far more complicated, and to be honest, I still haven't completely wrapped my head around it entirely. So, yeah, thank you for your time.